Hello, everyone. This is Lakshmi, Travel Plus Them. Happy Wednesday. It's been quite a busy day for me. I'm sure all of you as well, as they say, hump day. Today, we're having a conversation with Natalie Rios, who is going to be on to talk about something that we are very passionate about, our children, and creating a generation of children that are inclusive and embrace diversity. So the topic specifically is raising anti-racist kids. So I am going to have Natalie join. I'm going to bring her on right now. So give me 1 second. This is always the awkward time where we accept someone to join. Here we go.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I'm so
Good,
excited
thank you.
to
Now, it's on me
be
for
here.
the tardiness. I was running from another meeting, as you know how that's our world these days, right?
I know, it's totally fine. I'm totally okay.
Well, thank you
Well,
for being here. So I want to jump right in since we have a couple of people on. I'm so excited. We have some amazing people on. So why don't I do this? I'm going to first share how we met, and then I'd love for you to further introduce yourself. So for everyone that's on, I have been on a journey of thinking about raising inclusive citizens. It's something that comes from my childhood and my upbringing. And I didn't really know the path I was on until the last year. And one of my best friends, Jonathan, connected us. He said, there's someone you have to meet, and her sister, they're doing similar things to what you are. And she's a mother and she's like you. She loves to travel, talks to her children about other cultures and diversity. And so here we are. And so we have not formally met in person, but we have become quite acquainted in the world of technology. So then now I'm going to turn it over to you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and all the wonderful work that you're doing, and then we'll get our conversation started.
Great, sounds good. So yeah, that was a great intro. So my name is Natalie Rios. I am the co-director of Little Lola and Tots. As you mentioned, my sister and I are in business together. So we own Little Lola's together. We founded it together. I'm a single mom of 2 girls, and like you, we totally, we've always, since I became a mom, we've sort of been exploring different cultures. And very similar to you, I didn't realize the path I was on until we launched Little Lola and Tots. I think we were very much inspired by my parenting style, the idea of exploring different cultures and making for a more well-rounded child. So that's sort of it in a gist. So very similar, very excited to have met you. And yes, this is the first time we see each other.
Yes, the first time we've seen each other. So in the spirit of Hispanic Heritage Month, Latin Heritage Month, this is such an important conversation. And I'm just so glad that we're able to have this, especially this month. It just means a lot more to celebrate the richness and culture of your background and just for people of color overall. So why don't I get started with some questions that we received? So the first one, I mean, we say this term, raising anti-racist kids. I feel, I think intrinsically we all understand what it means, but in the last year plus, I'm just seeing it a lot more. And some of our followers had asked, what does it mean? What's our role as parents and our educators? So I'd love to hear more about all the great work you're doing with Little Lola and Tots and just on this bigger of raising anti-racist kids.
Yeah, so for you to be a non-racist, right? That's not enough, because that's a very passive approach. So I think for us and for the programming that we designed here at Little Lola's, it's to be an active, affect change. You know what I mean? So as an anti-racist child, you are basically empowering a child to stand up for things that they believe in, that are right, to advocate for others. So empower themselves, but also be able to break down these biases. And I think that as a new generation of parents, we are trying to make that change happen. You know,
Right.
I think like it's so different from our parents, and even now, like it's schooling my own parents, you know, schooling the people that
Good
came
point.
before us on understanding what's right and what's wrong, and being very present, because that's something that our children, they're sponges, they pick up on all of these things that these conversations. So it's modeling change for them in order for you to take a more active approach, and they in turn will affect change as well, being, you know, activists or standing up for what they believe is right, and breaking down like biases in general. So that's what it means. And you know, with little Lola, because we've been
Right.
been focusing so much on this, we have designed programs that are about cultural exploration. So we do it in an implicit way for little ones, but we also try to have also conversations, you know, like you mentioned, with the year that we've had, we've had a lot of serious conversations, and we've led a pod, and these conversations have come up. So it's finding those ways to ensure that they understand what's right and wrong, and
Right.
but being able to have the conversation with them, you know, not taking that passive approach.
So that's, you said a lot of things. So very interesting. So I think, you know, I always think everyone is good-hearted, right? Like we are the world. I'm like the glass is always half full for me, or even actually 3/4 full. But I always think positive intent, right? I don't think anyone intentionally, I just have to think that way to keep my hope alive, intentionally, you know, has negative feelings. I know it exists. I know it exists amongst all of us, myself included. Like it's a human thing. But when you said passive versus active, can we just dig deeper on that? Because a lot of people are, you know, they're scared to ask these questions because they just don't want to be perceived a certain way, and or feel like I should know all this already. I'm a parent. So can you just explain the differences and some tactical things when you say passive approach versus active approach? Like what are some things parents and educators can do to move, like to transform from a passive to an active approach?
Yeah, I think like, you know, a lot of times, you know, especially in this year that I've seen, to, you know, just speaking honestly, a lot of parents think like, okay, where are the resources? Where are the books that I can, you know, that I can grab so that my child sees differences and sees diversity and thinks inclusively. But that's, you know, that's just such a small way. I think it's so important to look inward and really dig deep and think about what racial biases you've adopted, you know, since you were a child. Because as a parent, I think modeling is one of the biggest ways that kids learn. So it's not just about, you know, traveling per se, but it's also about maybe nurturing relationships with people from various backgrounds so that you can have a rich network that your children can see. It's also, you know, having the conversations. Hey, this is the book that we've read. What sentiments have risen from this book? What do you think that we can do differently? Is there an example that you can think of? Was there something that, you know, you saw? How did that make you feel? You know, so those are different ways that we do it in a simpler, you know, way. But I think like looking internally as a person, as an individual, and really getting down to the root of those racial biases that you've been taught, or maybe as a person of color, you might not always advocate for yourself or your child because you've been raised with this idea that you know, that there's, you know, that there's nothing you can say, that you should not speak up because someone else is always right. You know what I mean? So that idea, even as a parent of color, you know, you can break through those sentiments, because I think that's something that comes that comes from your own childhood and how you've been raised, you know?
So you talked about books, and I want to come back to that later because that's a really big topic. Something else you said that I want to hone in a little deeper on. So I always say we have to normalize these things, right? Because just as we read books with our child, just as every day they do math, they go from additions to subtractions to eventually evolving into double digits, 3 digits, multiplication, discussing diversity, inclusivity, biases, that also needs to be normalized as an everyday discussion, because that's where I think there's a gap in, well, we talk about it when something happens, right? It's just, you know, we say it about like, even when we talk about prayer and things like that, for those who have, you know, follow a faith, we shouldn't just pray when we need something or when something's wrong. We should always do it, right? So it's the same concept when it comes to this. Is as parents, I don't know generationally if we've normalized it. We talk about it when we see something, hear something that's not good, but we don't just talk about it in a natural way that brings out a comfort level and a curious level in our children. Would you tend to agree with that?
Yeah, I think I do agree with that. I think perhaps, because we've been in this type of, in this business where we've designed programming around cultural exploration, we've been having conversations about change, about differences, about, different cultures, different food, different music. So it's like, it's in a way where it's not happening just because something is happening, out there. Because we're seeing, the good in it. You know what I mean? Like it's not coming out of something negative. Well, it's coming out of something positive.
Like Little Lola and Tots has it. I mean, if I was in Brooklyn, I would be there too, or even in Manhattan for that matter. But living in Miami, I don't have Little Lola and Tots. So can you share some tactical things that you've applied with your students that someone can do at home if they don't have the privilege to attend Little Lola and Tots?
Yeah, so like we mentioned books, right? But we do a lot of activities based on books and empowerment or, affirmations. So for us, it's also about applying it in a way where a child is doing something like a craft or something of that nature. Because, for example, one of our most popular boxes, cultural kits, is I Am Worthy, and it's modeled after. Well, it was inspired by. I designed the box, and it was inspired by Maya Angelou's "Life Doesn't Frighten Me at All," mixed with Jean-Michel Basquiat's art. And so we designed this because of the crown being such a important aspect and hit in the art that we see and in the pictures that we're seeing in the book. We sort of decided to make a crown. Children will be able to design their own crowns and then in the end say some affirmations that might make them feel better. So it's like a nice way for you to empower your child. You're basically exposing them to someone else's art, art by someone of color that has been very influential, poetry by one of my favorites, Maya Angelou. So I think in those ways of thinking of creative ways that you can do that.
Right.
We do that with our own book. I didn't want to jump into it, but
no, we're going to come back to the book because I wanted to get to some of our questions. And for those who are on, thank you for being here. Please feel free to add any questions in the chat. We will get to the book, trust me, because I love the book. So
I was just going to give an example about that, but it's okay. Yeah, we'll get to it.
This is a good one, and this is I'm so proud for the person who asked this question because it's sometimes again uncomfortable. So the question was, what is the role of white versus Black mothers or any people of color for that matter? And you and I are people of color, so there's things that we have been through, and I'm also an immigrant as well, speaks another language. I'm of another religion, and you have your immigrant story, and you speak another language as well. So I wanted the question I think was asked in the vein of, for people of color, we have these conversations maybe more often because of potentially what our children will go through. But what is something, and the person who asked was what is something they could do as a white woman? What can they do? And how do these conversations look in their household, especially if they're not exposed in their environment to really any diversity?
It's funny because I have friends. I have various friends through Little Lola and Tots. And when last year at one point, I remember everyone was feeling a certain way and certain emotions, and we were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and someone who wasn't of color that I think my son is too young to have these sort of conversations. And as a person of color, that kind of hits you in a different way because you're well, I had to sit down and explain and have this difficult conversation with my child. So this is something that totally hits home because and I think it's so important to see past this, the privilege that you have of not, of not having this conversation. So like, to me, it's more about being very in tune with what's happening is so important, because I think like a lot of things get lost in translation, or not lost in translation, but just there's just a very big gap between what's happening, you know, and the reality or somebody else's experience, and the
Right.
idea you can empathize and understand and explain it in some, you know, way that a child would understand. Because I think that even if you are not a person of color, you can sit down and have honest conversations with children that are particularly young. You can still say, you know, there are injustices that happen to people because they look different, because they don't look like you and I, and you know, and talk that through. Do you think that's right? Of course that's not. How do you think that person felt?
Right.
You know, those are situational sort of conversations that you can have, that I think a child would understand, because that's how we speak to our children every day about
Right
everything.
and wrong. Right. I mean,
you know,
that's
right
what I
and
mean.
wrong, and empathy. I think, like, you know, getting someone to understand, while empathy is very difficult to teach, right? You can still, depending on where your child is developmentally, you can still talk about these things. You know,
Yeah, and I think we think, I mean, scientifically, empathy is something that children feel. I mean, it happens early. I think we've just made it seem like it's not teachable. Because, for example, when a child is sick, I mean, children are like, oh, my tummy hurts. You want other, oh, are you okay? You want others to say that. So to me, that's empathy, right? Like, I think what I've learned is, even if a child doesn't specifically experience something, link it back to something they do experience, where they are sad, are happy, are mad, are like, you know, whatever, blah, whatever feeling they have, related to something they like or don't like. When they lose a soccer game, how that makes them feel, like that is empathy right there. So I think our children are born with it. As parents and educators, what we may not do is always connect the dots to having that empathy into other aspects.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you said, putting it in a manner that they would understand,
Right.
you know, just touching in on those sentiments that they felt before, even if the experience is not exactly the same.
Right.
That is so important. That's key. That's, you know, and we do that. That's what we do about everything else. So why not do it about something like, you know,
right.
Like,
I mean, it's becoming, you know, I think we've just brought a lot of things out in the open in the last year. And for many people, this has been their whole life. But for many others, it is something new.
Yeah.
So now let's, did any questions? I'm just looking on the chat. We've had about, we have a good amount of people. Some people are in and out, but let me go to some of the questions that were sent earlier. All right. So now let's talk about, you know, just other tactical things with our kids. So representation matters. You and I have both said it. When you said it too, I'm like, did she like read my mind? Because I always say representation matters. It's like a line I use. So let's talk about this topic. And I saw a lot of this last year from a lot of mothers that I met or educators that were doing a lot of work related to the DEI initiatives on the corporate end, but also when it comes to children. So diversify your bookshelf. Like, it's a new nomenclature that's used quite frequently. Can you please talk about what does that mean? And then tactically, how do we as parents do it, and or educators?
Yep. So I think, like, so diversifying your bookshelf is, you know, picking up books by different authors from different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences, different walks of life. Because I think we don't necessarily just have to focus on the cultural aspect of it, but I've diversified my bookshelf. When I became a single mom, I didn't think about single mom. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't feel the same way when I was reading a story about mom and dad, you know? And now there's so many different types of families, so many different types of characters. Yeah. So for me, diversifying your bookshelf is not necessarily just from a cultural lens, but more on, you know, just learning about different family structures, different, you know, dynamics, different walks of life in general. So I think, like, for me, I'm very big on that. Obviously, Little Lola's has a huge library, but I love picking up stories that my girls can also identify with, because I feel that when they see themselves in the story, it makes them feel, it gives them a sense of empowerment that, you know, that I can't, you know, that I love to see and that I revel in for real. So, but also just learning about different, like just different people and different cultures. Right. I feel like that's so rich in and of itself when, you know, I am Latina, but I'm Dominican. And when, and, you know, I love Frida, and although she, you know, she
right.
speaks Spanish just like us, it's a completely different culture. And when my daughter realized that she was not alive, it was like heartbreaking for her. But she recognizes Frida, you know, paintings, and just I just feel like it makes for a more well-rounded child. It makes for a right. more sensitive child. So I think like in diversifying your bookshelf, just like we were talking about empathy, it does, you know, while you're learning about different cultures and how people live in different places or the different languages that they speak, a child will be more sensitive to that, right. and will be more knowledgeable.
Yeah, and so it's interesting you say this, because last year I started talking a lot about this, and I had a mom I was coaching, and I'm like, let's look at your bookshelf. And I had to look at mine too, right? There's always traditional books that have been around forever, right? Goodnight Moon, you know, those kind of books, right? But as I get a little older, I'm like, what do the human characters in all your books look like? She's like, they're all white. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, let's not say it in a negative way at all. But why aren't there characters that look different, different shades? Like, let's start there, right? Because I think it's, you know, exposing to different cultures is also needed, but there could be like ages where that's more relevant than like a 2-year-old. But either way, I think instead of cultures, like, why do all the books have certain characters? And to your point, single parenthood, families look different. It's not a traditional mom and dad. It's not even, you know, it could be 2 mothers or 2 fathers or just one of someone. Could be a grandmother. I mean, to their point, there's so many ways and concepts to introduce to a child when they're younger. And there's a good amount of moms that came to me and said, all my books are generally white characters. I do not have people who look different. So where do I go to find these books? And so I think we saw a big uptick last year in different books becoming very popular that had characters that look different. But it's an ongoing opportunity for that, right? It's not a once and done. I did it when they were 3. How about when they're 5? Like, always constantly evolving to think in that spectrum. I mean, even to your point, special needs. My daughters have been exposed to people in our family with special needs, but I realized I don't have a book that maybe they can, you know, is articulated in a different way better than me. So I sought for that, because at the end of the day, that's when we think, I think sometimes when we think diversity, we're always thinking culture, color, right? And there's just so many other things. So it's great. You and I are on the same wavelength on that. Now I want to talk about Travel Con Lola. Travel Con Lola, mainly because it does a lot of things that were really welcomed in our home, and I'd love to learn about it. I love the travel because my children felt, and they've traveled a lot, but they have not been to Dominican Republic. So they felt like they learned about Dominican Republic. They loved seeing all shades of people represented in that book. So they're like, oh, it's like India. People come in all shades. Like, yes. Of course, finally, the language immersion, which was so beautifully done. I have to just say, because I read the book, so I'm not, this is your book, so, but I want to be the one to compliment it. I love the rhyming in English and Spanish. And I love, like, the Spanish words were just spot on, easy to understand what they meant, even if you did not know what they meant. So now let's talk more about it, the inspiration, how it came about. Would love to hear you and your sister's journey on
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, because we love to hear parents' perspective on it, especially and definitely when your children love it. So thank you. So Travel Con Lola it's twofold for us. So it was inspired by one of our classes that we teach here, which is traveling in your imagination and learning new cultures through music and food. And so it was definitely based on that, inspired by that, but also just touching on our own childhood. So we're first generation Dominican American sisters, and our parents were working every summer, so they would send us to Dominican Republic. So it was this idea, that we had a home there, but also have a home here. And right. It was so different. It was about being in tune with your roots, learning your language, eating the food, basically, it was a very humbling experience because it was so different from New York. I mean, sometimes the electricity would go out and you were allowed to like just, be by candlelight playing cards with our grandmother. The book is dedicated to our grandmother who, God, may she rest in peace, but she was such an influential part of our like growing up. We were so close to her. And we used to spend every summer there. And it's funny because now, like, that's sort of what I have going on with my daughters, where I send them to Dominican Republic where my parents have retired so that they can go and spend summers there and immerse themselves in the language that they, that they might not hear all the time, in school here, because so for sure for us, it was about representation. It was about teaching, just like our class, is about educating kids and exploring different cultures. And of course, La República Dominicana, because it made sense for us. We wanted to share our language. We wanted to share our story. So that was something that was definitely, is very dear and near to our heart.
And this is, I use this tagline a lot on my information unit. While travel may be considered a privilege, a global education should not be. And in that vein, I was like, when it comes to the book search for children, there's not a lot of books that take children around the world in that age, like early elementary I'm talking about. I mean, older they get, there's other options. And so I think it's a unique market because it's another level of diversity when it comes to having these kids travel. So you're getting to experience this country through a book. That builds the curiosity for more. The language immersion. So it's a huge market and a different market that it's great that you entered it, because it's a gap from all my book research. There are a few out there, but it's not like consistent. You see so many other books that have series of books, but not necessarily when it comes to let's take children like around the world through books.
Yeah, so that's sort of like, so Travel con Lola inspired it. We've taught a lot of classes that are based on our own travels because we've traveled, a bit. So our idea is to first kick off, a series of books on all the places that we've traveled to, and then have an excuse to explore and travel more and write more. So Travel con Lola hopefully is the first of many, but we decided to do the Dominican Republic because, this is who we are, and this is the story that we wanted to share. But yeah, to your point, that's what Travel con Lola, the class is, and that is what we're hoping to accomplish with the book as well.
Wonderful. It's wonderful. It's awesome. So I think I'm looking around to see if there's been any questions. Oh, so important to share different cultures with children early. We have a lot of folks listening. I think these are a lot of your wonderful friends and supporters that are here. People are flying and stuff. So let's so what are the resources? So let's talk about where we can find you. Where can people get in contact with you and learn about what you do and all the resources you have? So go through your social media and everything.
Yeah. So we are very active on social media. We definitely put all of our work out there and all of the workshops that we offer and, everything that we have going on. So it's little.lola.and.hots. That is our handle for, so it's just written out, but periods in between everything. But our website is www.littlelolatots.com. So no and. So littlelolatots.com. We're right now gearing up to host another parenting workshop that's primarily focused for parents and educators, because we've gotten a lot of interest in the anti-racist parenting workshops that we've hosted in the past. So we're now doing it on, for parents. It's for a small group. We're capping it at 20. So it's,
and this is an in-person workshop or is it virtual?
No, it's going to be a virtual workshop on November 17th.
Okay.
And it's going to be from 4 to 6 p.m. We've teamed up with a life coach who's also a mom friend that I know for a few years. And she's amazing. And she's going to be leading the workshop, and it's been, she really creates a safe space for everyone to have like conversations about these things, because We need that, right? We need that so that we can be vulnerable, so that we can, not feel judged by the questions that we might be asking if we do not know. So it's about educating yourselves. And she provides such a great workshop, and she's such a great resource. So definitely we are offering an early bird discount. So for anyone that might want to join, we're going to be running an early bird discount for a week or so. But yeah, all of our information is going to be posted online in our IG handle. So everyone that goes to our Instagram is going to be able to have that information.
Perfect. So again, it's little.lola.and.tots on Instagram. Website is littlelolaandtots.com. They have a newsletter.
Little Lola Tots.
Oh, littlelolatots.com. I said and, see?
Yeah.
See that and symbol, and it's like a symbol too. littlelolatots.com. Please sign up for their newsletter. There's different resources and different guides there, a lot of different things you can navigate. And that's where the book is, right? Travel con Lola is found on your website.
Yes, Travel con Lola is on our website. We also have a very cool cultural kit if you wanted to go a little more in depth with the exploration with your child, and that includes a map of Dominican Republic, and it has stickers with different fruits that you find in DR. It has an activity sheet that's based on traveling and just learning more and being able to engage a little bit more with your child, and then a really cute maraca craft for when you dance merengue or bachata.
That's similar. So Travel Plus Them has Around the World in 60 Minutes. So it's a video actually fully made by my daughter about the 25 plus countries she's traveled to. And then it has a workbook and a passport book, make your own passport. One of the things she told me is so many people don't have passports. And I realized wow, a lot of kids don't know what one looks like. They haven't had it. So we made make your own. So very similar as far as that country and cultural kind of immersion. So I love what you're doing. Thank you for sharing that information. I'm just looking to see if you have any other questions. So I just also wanted to share something I'm working on, and we're collaborating on this. So there is a Florida conference for teachers that are focused on the early education space. It's a chapter of the national organization, and Travel Plus Them has been invited to speak at one of the sessions. So the topic is fostering inclusivity through a global education. So Little Lola and Tots with Natalie and her sister, they are helping me with being able to, give the the educators all these different learning experiences on how to bring the world into the classrooms. Because there's no one right and only way. There's so many different ways. And so the teachers will be also visiting Little Lola and Tots online, just so they can have some of these access to these resources as well. Because, we're both mothers. So we're always thinking in our mother lens first. And then Natalie's also an educator, so then that's her next lens. But there's so many educators who may or may not be parents, and or their children are, grown up. And that's a huge and such an integral audience for us to connect with, because they are a huge influence in our lives of our children. And they don't always have access to these types of information. We assume they do. They don't always. So I think it's great that, Natalie, you're working with educators as well, because it's just a lot of them have come to me and said, I don't really have these materials. So it's great that we're not just thinking in the eyes of our, as parents, but we're also thinking in the eyes of educators.
Yeah, no, and that's one thing that I forgot to mention now that you say that if you do decide to take the workshop, you are going to receive this living, website that has a bunch of resources that includes books. It includes different activities that you can do at home, like the one that I mentioned earlier, before, with videos, to show you what to do. Sometimes we might not know what language to use. So, it includes all of that. So there's so much resources in those pages, and it's a living resource guide that we will continuously update with different, exhibitions that you might want to check out virtually, or maybe visit in person.
Very nice.
Where you are. So for sure, those are different, and affirmations that you might, be able to share with your students, or, journal prompts for the older children, so we do have so many resources there, and
Wonderful.
that you would have access to if you decide to participate in the workshop, and also when we collaborate.
Yeah, so I received a message when someone said, when can they learn more about you on your next live? So you need, that's a tip for you. You need to go live more often. And just I think, you know, people just want it, they need information. And so thinking you need to come back and share more. And I think it could be a really great value, because these discussions are never once and done. They're ongoing, and we evolve in each time we have it. So
yeah, for sure. For sure. We're actually having a live on the 12th.
okay.
So the 12th at 2 p.m. It's in collaboration with White House Black Market, but
Great.
it is going to be fun and interesting. We've been grant recipients, launchers for Ladies Who Launch. So we're doing a collaborative effort with them through White House Black Market.
Okay,
so
so
we're going
that's
to be live on the 12th at 2 p.m.
Eastern time, correct?
Eastern
We have a couple of time
Eastern.
zones. You know, you never know who's attending and what time zone.
I know, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah. So next week.
All right, wonderful. So I don't see any other questions. Natalie, is there anything else you wanted to share about the topic, about yourself?
No, it's been a pleasure getting to know someone, you know, that's so like-minded. I would love, you know, I wish we were closer so our girls can meet. But I'll definitely check out your daughter's work too, so that my little ones can join in and have fun.
Yes, that would be wonderful. This is how it all works, right? It takes a village, and
yes, for sure.
I say, like, even a sprinkle of knowledge opens a world of curiosity. And our children's are sponges. We're not sponges anymore, you know. Our learning curve is not as fast as theirs, and they pick up and process things and keep it with them even longer than we can. So it's truly amazing to see this generation of future global citizens that we have. Like, they're going to change the world for the better.
They are.
All right.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Remember, Little Lola and Tots on Instagram, and then littlelolatots.com for more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.